My name's John Amaechi. I am a psychologist, formerly a therapist in America, marriage and family therapist, but nowadays working in organizational settings. I played basketball in the NBA, National Basketball Association in America for, I don't know, I entered the NBA in 1995 and retired in 2005. So I had a fairly good run. I also played in Europe for a couple of European championship teams. So I've seen basketball across the globe at a pretty high level. When I first started basketball, all I was interested in was playing in the NBA. In fact, I wasn't really fully aware, no, that's not even true, I wasn't aware at all that there was any game in Europe at all. So my focus from the very beginning was, how do I get from where I am to America? How do I get from being in America generically to being at a university team, which is what you need to do in America to advance, and then how do I get from that university team to the NBA, and in a very short period of time. As it happened, I started basketball very late, at 17 years old, and 6 years after that I was starting my first game in the NBA. There was no other place that in my head that I thought I could go. In terms of my mindset, I think it's the most important differentiator in sports, without a doubt. We recognize this in a really anecdotal way, especially in Britain. So it often takes like Andy Murray to change almost nothing physically over the last few years, but change his coach and then change his kind of mental approach to the game, and then people are like, oh, of course, mental approach makes a difference. For me, I was highly conscious-suggestive. So when people told me something was impossible, I set out to prove that it was doable. My physics teacher in school in Manchester, Stockport, told me that I had more chance of being hit by a meteor than playing in the NBA. And whilst I can't really credit him with being my main motivation, I very much enjoyed the opportunity to, in my head, I played the scenario of me coming back to school 10 years hence and shaking this man's hand and saying, what do you think about me now? So the mental approach has a big part. I think the biggest thing for me was the idea that I didn't go by any of the rudimentary goal setting stuff, short, medium, long term. I took care of pragmatic things that needed to be taken care of. I was a fat, out of shape English kid with no connections to America. So that just lent itself to a certain number of things that had to be achieved. I had to get in shape, I had to play basketball 24/7, I had to make connections with America somehow. And it just presented me with pragmatic steps that I needed to take every day to get towards this big overriding vision, which was playing in the NBA. I definitely had not anticipated the pain involved in becoming a professional athlete. I could see the life, and I could see my body with muscles and with less fat than it had when I was a 17-year-old kid. But I hadn't anticipated the amount of pain it would take to get myself from where I was to where I want to go. There were constant setbacks. But to me, personally, getting past those was a question of, I want this more than anything else in the world. Therefore, it takes priority. Nothing else matters. So when I was disappointed by something, I simply rerouted my energy around this to something else that I could focus on in the medium term to push me forward. So I sent 3,000 letters to America, and for several weeks nobody replied. Everything in great success is about process. Dogged determination is helpful, but it really is just about process. So, at some point, if I'd have been really kind of outcome oriented, then the very idea of playing in the NBA, when I was a fat kid eating pasties on Market Street, would have been absurd. I just wouldn't have even bothered because it would have seemed so ridiculously far removed. But rather, I focused on what I needed to do today in order to be another step ahead at the end of the day, and that way it took care of. I still had this big overarching vision, and it was very detailed and vivid, and I could see myself playing with the players, with the contemporary players of my era, and that was important. But at the same time, I didn't get lost in that image. I got stuck on the idea of today I need to be able to do more push-ups than yesterday. Today I need to shoot this number of shots. Today I need to practice this number of hours. Today I need to make this number of connections in order to get me on the next step. When I actually first made it to the NBA, my first game was against the Chicago Bulls, and Michael Jordan, the best player ever, pretty much. And it was all very surreal. I said before that sometimes when you have your mind focused on an improbable dream for an extended period of time, when you get there, it's surreal, and yet at the same time it can be a little disappointing. Because it's like your life goal has been a comic book that you've been reading your entire life, and then eventually you turn the page and you're in it. You're in the comic book. And then the question is, what's next? Because you've already done it. And especially when it's an impossible dream. When a fat English kid talks about playing in the NBA, they're not thinking about how many points they're going to score per game. They're not thinking about how many minutes they're going to play, how many years they're going to play in the NBA. They're just thinking about getting to the NBA. And then you suddenly realize you get there and there's a whole new level of things you have to focus on. Competing at that level, staying there, staying great. And that's the next challenge. In terms of confidence, the thing I enjoyed about playing when I was at my best was the idea that my confidence in my abilities was backed up by practical fact. I knew that when I shot the ball in practice, I didn't miss unless I didn't focus. Which meant it's led to at least 2 years in the middle of my career when I was at my peak, where if I missed, I was surprised. I've even got some video of me taking a shot and doing like a double take because it missed. There is something remarkable about confidence that it can even overwhelm technique. It can even overwhelm whatever the opponent throws at you. As long as there is space for you to perform your technique, whether it's a shot or a kick on goal or whatever, it's almost as if all other factors are irrelevant. It doesn't matter how tall your defender, how quick the goalie, how fast your competitor, your defender. It just doesn't matter. Confidence can have that kind of impact, and for me, that was when I knew I was really good. When it wasn't just a question of muscle memory, but it was a question that my brain already knew that when in this position, I don't miss. On the other side, if you work on that kind of evidentiary-based confidence, where because you're playing really well, you know that you're good, it also has the impact that if you do have a little slump, which can be brought on by injury, or even by a knock that changes your muscle memory, or at least alters the way that your physiology is working temporarily, some issue with your back or whatever else, all of a sudden, the evidence is now telling you that you're not as good as you were yesterday. So it doesn't mean you have to have a huge drop-off in performance to suddenly have this crisis of, why am I not as good as I was last year or last week? And I've had that experience too, where all of a sudden I got to a point where I could feel myself hesitating to shoot because in my head I was thinking I missed 2 more of these than I would normally miss, even if that percentage is a ridiculously high one. So confidence to me is the, in sports now, where the difference between the kind of physiological bulk of the athletes are in a very, very tight band that's very, very high up the scale. The difference between the best and the worst of them is a matter of their mental approach to the sport, their mental resilience, and also their levels of confidence.